G'day, hi, and welcome. Let's just jump into this. Alright, so how much do you have to spend to get a professional guitar? Uh, I thought this would be an interesting little video. Obviously, this will just be a picture video. It's like basically going to be a talking video. And just in my experience and what qualifies me to be the best on the topic, because I say so. Now it's just my opinions and stuff like that. But there is, when you buy your first electric guitar, it's usually going to be probably not the best guitar in the world. It'll probably be something you're going to grow fond of. You'll play it well. You'll wear it out, whatever. And then you get to the point where you buy your second guitar. Now, what you see a lot of guys do is they buy, say, like a $500 guitar, and it plays well and all that. And then they buy another $500 guitar or $400 guitar, and then before you know it, they got five or six really okay guitars sitting there. And if you add them all up, they got about 3 grand worth of guitars. And yet they'll and I've done this as well, where it's like you're like, oh, I can't justify the price of this guitar, justify the price of that guitar. It's too expensive. But then you've got five guitars sitting there at $500. There's $2,500. Now for $2,500, a lot of people, could spend that money many different ways. But let's say you are going to spend that kind of money on a guitar. Do you need to spend $2,500 to get a pro guitar? Well, the answer is no. You don't need to spend that much at all. Mind you, for $2,500, you can get pretty much any guitar on the market within reason, unless you're talking like most Gibsons are going to be like basically up to the $5,000 mark, right? So you can look at it like that, where you can get into any brand's professional guitars at that money. There's no doubt about that. But can you get it, say, a professional guitar under $1,000? The answer is yes, if you don't care about the bells and whistles, the rarity, or the make, or whatever, or model, and you're just going by playability and sound quality, which should be usually what you go for. But like there's like, for example, I like SGs. I'm an SG guy, but I also love flying Vs, so I tend to seek out SGs and flying Vs a lot. And that's fine and dandy, because whatever floats your boat. Maybe you're a Stratocaster guy, or you're a Les Paul guy, or you're a Telecaster guy, or you like these shredder guitars. Like these hammers, which were, I don't know why Hammer don't make those guitars anymore. I had a Hammer Diablo years ago, and it was just absolutely awesome. But regardless of how do you know if it's a pro guitar or not? Well, first off, your playing is what makes you pro. It's really how well you play. So I always kind of chalk it up to this: the music is from within. The instrument is the tool, and the quality of the instrument is the icing on the cake. Um, so basically, if you have a more refined instrument that plays better, sounds better, you tend to want to play it more. You tend to play more. You tend to get better practiced up. You tend to sound better, right? You get more experience. But there's also the thing is that uh, you also learn, like there's a lot of guitars on the market that you can buy that are really, no matter what price they're at, they're almost best left on the shelf. Yeah, cool to look at, but they don't give you the sound. Or they give you great looks, they give you good sound, but there's better players for cheaper, that kind of thing. So usually that's where I start. When I'm judging a guitar, I'll walk into a store, and pretty much every guitar on the wall with that I have time to grab. Obviously, I'll grab the guitars that are of most interest to me, and I'll try all price ranges of guitars, because sometimes you find a gem for very little money. Like, for example, when I was looking for seven strings, which I ended up buying an eight string instead of a seven string, but that's beside the point. Um, I tried, I think, seven or eight different seven strings, and ranging from prices from about $250 or something like that, or 270, whatever it was, right up to something like $2,200 or whatever. And the guitar that impressed me the most was $600. It was an Ibanez RGA, I think, and it was in that, forget the Marenti body or whatever. It looks like a really dark stained mahogany almost, and it was a natural finish, and just no bells and whistles whatsoever on this guitar. But it played incredibly well. Um, like the tension on it was reasonable. Where one of the cheaper guitars, don't remember what brand it was. It was a 7 string, and it was really, 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 really high tension on the strings, and there was 3 7 strings that were in the same price range, and it was just that Ibanez one. I'm not saying all Ibanez's will be like this, but that particular guitar was just, it was a real player. It was, again, if you walked out of there with tax and all, you'd be probably under $800. And okay, you might not have the best pickups in there, but you got a really good playing guitar that sounds good enough, right? So yeah, well under $1,000. My 8 string. Now, I haven't played a lot of 8 strings, I'll be honest with you. Um, but the 8 strings that I have tried, I tried like again, from like about $200 or $300 up to, uh, I guess, $2,000 or whatever. And I ended up getting an LTD EC2 258 8 string, because it was a lot of guitar for the money. Number one, it's a lot of guitar in the sense the thing weighs a ton, because it's solid mahogany and body and neck, right, with a Jabota fingerboard, and reasonably high output pickups, not insanely high output pickups, but high output enough. But the string tension on it is actually pretty good. Now, this guitar I lucked out because I didn't mail order on it, but it, out of the few 8 strings that I have tried, this one plays much easier than most of the other 8 strings that I've tried, and I'm sure there's much better one. But the thing about this one is it came in right around $1,000 with tax, shipping, and all. In Canadian dollars was 1,040. Now, mind you, once again, the guitar, almost no bells and whistles on it whatsoever. Satin black. It has like a little pinstriping around the edge of the body, painted, and it's like matte finish black, and it does have the flag inlays, so that's actually kind of kind of neat. If it had dot inlays, it might be a bit cheaper, but I don't think they make one with the dot inlays. So, but for the money, it's a pro guitar. It's not phenomenal, but it plays well enough, and it sounds really good, for the genre that I want to play it in. So it's a pro guitar under, a tad bit over $1,000. Um, Guitars, like, for example, you can get, if you like Paul Reed Smith's, those custom 24s, the 2408, they're just right in around $1,000 after tax and all. But you can get the base model, custom 24, for like I think like $800 or something like that. Like, it's like 800 and something. So it'd come in right in under $1,000. Pro guitar, maybe not the best pickups in the world, but plays well enough, last you years. There's many Fender Strats that you can get like that. Now, with Stratocasters and Telecasters, one thing about a Telecaster, it seems like it doesn't matter what price point they are at, they all sound good. It's just which one sounds better. And again, you can buy a Stratocaster $500-600, and you'll have a hard time differentiating it from a $12,000 Strat. You know what I mean? Because like, more money for a guitar does not necessarily equal more guitar. You know what I mean? Like, you don't there is a threshold where you're really not going to get any better of a guitar than that. And back in the 90s, I'd say guitars between $800 and $1,200. After $1,200, it was kind of like you're paying for cosmetics, rarity, name, whatever. So, whatever. After that, it's about as good as a guitar can get. I would, with inflation and everything, I'd say between say $1,100 and $1,600, you can get a guitar that it's as good as it's going to get. Like, a guy could pay $10,000 guitar, and it's not going to be in your category of guitar, and it's not going to be any better than your $1,600 guitar. And a lot of that is good, again, cosmetics and whatever. But for playability, sound quality, whatever, that's probably a price range where you can get the best pickups on the market for your whatever sound you're going for, the best fretwork, the best whatever. $2,000, you get all the bells and whistles. uh, for sure. But again, you have to hunt around. So for me, I start off, I walk into a store, I grab a guitar, play it off the wall. The first thing I listen for is how it sounds unplugged. The first thing I look for is how well it plays. Uh, like, are the frets sharp? Are they, I listen to every note on the fretboard to hear if there's kind of like dead notes. And sometimes you have to play a guitar for a month or two to actually discover that something on the guitar is not optimal. Sometimes it's not obvious right away, especially with the quality control we have nowadays. It's much like, it's a guitar player's paradise. I can't imagine guitars getting much better than they are today. But who knows with technology? Maybe the best playing and best sounding guitar in the world today might be the beginner guitar of tomorrow. You know what I mean? And that's kind of already happened, because if I go back to like the 80s, guitars under $300 in the 80s were just like, you could damage your fingers and hands playing them. Like, they were so horrible. You didn't get a real player or something livable till about $400 or $500. Nowadays, you buy a $500 or $300 guitar and it plays like the $1,200 guitars of the 1980s. You know what I mean? Like, just the technology has come along. They might not sound as good, but like, they're made better, and they're made out of cheaper materials a lot of times too, which is impressive. But when you do buy your second guitar or your first pro guitar, I think you should buy one cheap guitar, and after that start saving up for, or do like what I did, is just put everything on credit card and pay it off. But get something that you're going to be happy with. Now, for me, I'm one of those guys that likes a lot of different guitar sounds. So, for example, I'd like to have my Flying V that I have, but I also want like a Gretsch hollow body beside it or something like that for a completely different type of sound, right? So whatever you're going for, maybe you're never going to do jazz, maybe you're never going to do country, maybe you're just going to be a metal guy all the way. This is what I got. I got one of these. Well, I got two Jacksons, but I recently got one of these, and this thing is just absolutely phenomenal. And it came in around $1,600 Canadian. It was like 1580 or whatever by the time it arrived at my place. And I don't think I've owned a better guitar. I've owned a lot of good guitars. And the thing is you go in the store, you try them all out, and you try all the guitars in the price range that you can afford, and you pick the best one out of them. And that, always gives you kind of like the cream of the crop of whatever category you're in. And I think that's the easiest way to figure out whether you got a pro guitar or not. Because what happens with a really good guitar, okay, is like, for example, my Gibson SGs. They're really good guitars. But I started off, I played a lot of Epiphones too. I had an Epiphone Les Paul. That thing was fantastic. It was a 92 model. First year that Gibson kind of, brought out like the, not bought Epiphone. Gibson owned Epiphone for a lot longer before that, but it was like the first where, well, at least up here in Canada, where we saw like Les Pauls, pretty much carbon copies with a different headstock. Slightly cheaper hardware, whatever, but my 92 Epiphone Les Paul sounded unplugged. You couldn't tell it from the Gibson at all, except for the neck was a little bit knobbier. But when you plugged it in, you obviously heard the difference in the pickups and stuff like that. But that said, I remember my Epiphone Les Paul, I swapped out the Epiphone bridge pickup for a Duncan 59, and that guitar sounded phenomenal. It was as good as any. It sounded as good as any Les Paul standard of the time. I'll just say that. I know some people would probably fight me on it, but it didn't play as quite as nice as a Gibson Les Paul, but it played well enough. And I gigged with that guitar, and I'd always get the same reaction to it every time I played it live. It was like, wow, that guitar sounds great. But I had a Hammer Diablo in translucent emerald green, and that was my main guitar, my main stage guitar. But it was the backup was that Epiphone. So the Epiphone was more like a beginner guitar, and it was like 300 and some odd bucks. And yet here I am getting like crazy sustain and everything out of it. And then I had the hammer, which was about $800 at the time, 850 or whatever. Came in just under $1,000 or just a little over $1,000 at the time, and that guitar was phenomenal. It's now, I consider it was my second best sounding guitar, and it wasn't just me saying that, because like the guitars I play live, people will give me this kind of feedback. It's like, hey, that sounds good. Wow, great playing. And then you'll get like sound guys, sound engineers or whatever, they'll be like, that guitar is killer, dude. Oh wow, that thing sounds amazing. That's the best sounding guitar I've heard on that stage. And when you hear sound men say that to you a few times in different venues, you know you got a really good sounding guitar. Especially like, oh wow, I love the sound of my guitar. But when other people notice it, you know you got something good, right? But how do you find those guitars? Well, again, you can chalk it up to many things. First off, it has to be a good playing guitar. Every note has to ring out really well on the fingerboard, and then after that, it's pickups and tone wood and whatever. And I know some people don't believe in tone woods. I know I'm always talking about that. I've always said if you can't hear the difference, don't worry about it. And I'm not saying I have the golden ears or whatever, but I'm saying that after you play a guitar for a certain while, you're going to start to hear the characteristics of that guitar, and you may like them, you may not like them. It's like maybe you get a guitar like this. If you've ever played one of these things are awesome, right? But if you're a really dark metal guy, you might find that guitar way too bright for you. So you can go into a store and you can spend your money on a lot of different things. Like for example, the Epiphone Les Pauls. What's nice about them is they're relatively inexpensive, but they do hold up well live. Like they hold their tuning fairly well live. They're a solid guitar. Stratocasters are like that, where they're good gigging guitars because the necks are thicker, so they don't warp on you. Where sometimes you get some guitars, they sound great, they play great, but they don't hold up live. And if you're going to destroy a guitar, it's going to be live. The more you gig, especially if you gig in the winter up here in Canada. I haven't gigged in a long time, but that's what happened to my Hammer Diablos. It basically just it was a kind of a bit of a tragic story. What happened is the singer left the guitars pretty much in the back of his Camaro all winter. After we'd go from the jam night or a gig or whatever, I'll bring the guitars home. We thought he was bringing it because me and the other guitar player would just put our guitars in there because it was easier to go home with it, in the small truck. With 3 guys in there without all that equipment, right? Especially in the wintertime. So we just say, yeah, just put it at your house. But he didn't think to bring the guitars in. He just drove around in like -40 with these poor guitars in the back trunk bouncing around. So it messed them all up and whatever. But other than that, I'm pretty sure the guitars would have held up pretty good. So again, finding a pro guitar, like your second guitar should be something that, okay, if it takes you a year to save up for it, and I get it, there's a lot of people, got other priorities or whatever. Some guitars you can do payments on. I'd rather do payments for like a year or so on a guitar and have a guitar that you're going to have for years and years and years than to buy something cheaper that you're always, every time you play, it's like, yeah, I like it, it's good, it does the job. Boy, I wish it could do this. Boy, I wish it had a little bit more of that. And that's what I got with a lot of my guitars. I tend to hang on to my good guitars for long periods of time, although I've gotten rid of some pretty awesome guitars too. But what got me when I had 5 guitars sitting there, and there was like 5 mediocre guitars, and I'm like, there's my Gibson, there's my Jackson, Flying V or whatever. So for me, it's like I now don't buy. I've got one inexpensive guitar for jam nights and the guitar to beat up for that, and then I've got everything else is like, okay, get good quality. If even you own fewer guitars but own better, you know what I mean? Because again, if it's a guitar you really like, you'll play it more. You don't necessarily have to break the bank. I know people are, again, I'm not rich either, so I'm very conscientious about what guitar I buy. Sure, there's a lot of flashy guitars you can buy, But I'll tell you what happens. You buy 6 guitars or 7 guitars, okay, and you'll always play the best one the most. You know what I mean? You might get an inclination to play the cheaper ones once in a while just for nostalgia, but you play them and then you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's why I like the other one more. You know, and I do this a lot of times with my 61 reissue, whereas I don't play it all the time, but I've had the guitar for 14 years or something like that. Yeah, 14 years, and I've had my SG3 for 17 years now, right? So these guitars are well played. But right now, it's the newness of my Jackson guitar. I play it all the time, but when I want to hear something completely different, I grab the SGs, right? So I won't get rid of those other guitars because they give me something different. So for me, when I buy guitars now, I'm looking at something that's going to give me something different. So I'm not buying the same guitar over and over and over again. A lot of people tend to do that. They buy 5 metal guitars and then they wonder why they can't get a different sound. Or they buy 5 like Stratocasters and it's like, oh, I can't get a metal sound out of it. You know what I mean? My hammer was that color and it was similar to that, except for it didn't have the flashy fingerboard. But anyway, just to wrap it up, I guess is if you're going to buy a good quality guitar and you found the one you want and everything like that, and it's doing the job for you, your tastes might change too, whatever. But at least if you do decide to sell the guitar and it's a better quality guitar, you'll get more money out of it on the resale, which can finance another guitar, right? You know, maybe you save up a bit and whatever, and then you could have, or you buy a really good guitar and you have your cheap guitar as your backup. Usually that's what happens. You know, people take their cheap guitar, they either sell it, and if they don't, and they play a gig, they usually take the cheap guitar and put it on, at the back of the stage, just in case you break a string, whatever might happen, right? But then you buy a second guitar, you don't buy a third cheap guitar because there's no point in doing that because you won't play it very much, right? And if you buy a good guitar, once you buy one good guitar, it kind of changes your philosophy of how you buy guitars. So then it's no longer, okay, well, I'm going to buy this $200 guitar, this $400 guitar, and having like 8 guitars that, yeah, it looks cool that you got 8 guitars, but they don't do anything more for you. Where if you have 2 really good guitars or 3 really good guitars, maybe you got a Stratocaster, a Les Paul, and like a Jackson Flying V, or whatever, a Soloist or whatever, and they're all top quality, and then maybe you have the cheap guitar as a jam night guitar or whatever, or when you're gigging, you alternate. One night you want to play the Les Paul, the other night you want to play the Flying V. You've always got something that whatever's in your hands, you really, really enjoy it. And that's what professional guitars or pro guitars kind of give you, is that extra enjoyment, because they sound better, they play better, maybe they look cooler, whatever it is. And that's why I think it's worth it to invest. This is my cheap GS32. Great guitar. Most people, that's all the guitar they'll ever need. That's a good jam night guitar and everything. $400, right? But it plays incredible for a $400 guitar, and it sounds okay. That said, comparing it to my Jackson Flying V or something like the Ingve Strat, if you ever get a chance to try one of these things, they're nuts. But that's the type of guitar, like it's a pro guitar, it does a certain thing, and you never need not want as much, because once you got something in your hands that plays really well, sounds great, it's the icing on the cake. Then all you do is concentrate on the playing. You're never distracted by, gee, I wish this sounded a little better, or I wish it had a little more of this or a little more of that. So anyway, that's just my opinion on how to pick a good guitar. Go in the store, try everything on the wall, compare them unplugged, compare how they play, because a lot of times playing a guitar unplugged will tell you a lot about the guitar. Then after that, the pickups or whatever, because a lot of times if the guitar sounds great unplugged, it's probably almost won't matter what kind of pickups are in it. It's going to sound good no matter what. So anyway, fun little video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. All links are down below if you want to help support the channel. Like that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day.